Acid bath. The Starway's lone watcher had experienced some odd developments in his single nerve-fraught job in the asteroid, but nothing like the weird 21-day liquid test devised by the invading Steel Blues. John Carl was bolting in a new baffle plate on the stationary rocket engine. It was a tedious job and took all his concentration, so he wasn't paying too much attention to what was going on in other parts of the little asteroid. He didn't see the peculiar blue spaceship, its rockets throttled down as it drifted to land only a few hundred yards away from his plastic igloo. Nor did he see the half-dozen steel blue creatures slide out of the peculiar vessel's airlock. It was only as he crawled out of the depths of the rocket power plant that he realized something was wrong. By then, it was almost too late. The 6 blue figures were only 50 feet away, approaching him at a lope. John Carl took one look and went bounding over the asteroid's rocky slopes in 50-foot bounds. When you're alone, watcher and strangers catch you unawares, you don't stand still. As he fled, John Carl cursed softly under his breath. The automatic alarm should have shrilled out a warning then. He saved as much of his breath as he could, as some sort of power wave tore up the rocky sward to his left. He twisted and zigzagged in his flight, trying to get out of sight of the strangers. Once hidden from their eyes, he could cut back and head for the underground entrance to the service station. He glanced back finally. 2 of the steel blue creatures were jackrabbiting after him and rapidly closing the distance. John Carl unsheathed the stub-ray pistol at his side. Turning the oxygen dial up for greater exertion increased the gravity pull of his spacesuit boots as he neared the ravine he'd been racing for. The oxygen was just taking hold when he hit the lip of the ravine and began sprinting through its man-high, bush-strewn course. The power ray from behind ripped up great gobs of the sheltering bushes, but running naturally bent close to the bottom of the Rav ravine, John Carl dodged the bare spots. The oxygen made the tremendous exertion easy for his lungs as he sped down the dim trail hidden from the 2 steel blue stalkers. He eluded them temporarily at least, John Carl decided, when he finally edged off the dim trail and watched for movement along the route behind him. He stood up, finally pushing aside the leafy overhang of a bush, and looked for landmarks along the edge of the ravine. He found one, a stubby bush shaped like a Maltese cross clinging to the lip of the ravine. The hidden entrance to the service station wasn't far off. His pistol held ready, he moved quietly on down the ravine until the old watercourse made an abrupt hairpin turn, instead of following around the sharp bend. John Carl moved straight ahead through the overhanging bushes until he came to a dense thicket. Dropping to his hands and knees, he worked his way under the edge of the thicket into a hollowed-out space in the center. There, just ahead of him, was the lock leading to the service station, the lock closing softly behind him. At the end of the long tunnel, he stepped to the televisor which was fixed on the area surrounding the station. John Carl saw none of the steel blue creatures, but he saw their ship. It squatted like a smashed-down kid's top, its lock shut tight. He turned the televisor to its widest range and finally spotted one of the steel blues. He was looking into the stationary rocket engine. As Carl watched, a second steel blue came crawling out of the ship. The 2 steel blues moved towards the center of the televisor range. They're coming towards the station, Carl thought. Grimly, Carl examined the 2 creatures. They were of steel blue color from the crown of their egg-shaped heads to the tips of their walking appendages. They were about the height of Carl's 6 feet, but where he tapered from broad shoulders to flat hips. They were straight down. They had no legs, just appendages, many jointed that stretched and shrank independent of each other, but keeping the cylindrical body with its 4 pairs of tentacles on a level balance. Where their eyes would have been was an elliptical-shaped lens covering half, the egghead with its converging ends curving around the sides of the head. Robots, John gauged immediately. But where were their masters? The steel blues moved out of the range of the televisor. A minute later, John heard a pounding from the station upstairs. He chuckled. They were like the wolf of pre-atomic days, who huffed and puffed and blew the house down. The outer shell of the station was formed from sterilite, the toughest metal in the solar system. With the self-sealing lock of the same resistant material, a mere pounding was nothing. John thought he'd have to look-see anyway. He went to the steel ladder leading to the station's power plant and the televisor that could look into every room within the station. He heaved a slight sigh when he reached the power room, for right at his hand were weapons to blast the ship from the asteroid. John adjusted one televisor to take in the lock of the station. His teeth suddenly clamped down on his lower lip.